Why, hello there, and welcome to the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you a competitive edge. I'm your host, Max, and today we're continuing our series of conversations on AI, its impact on our lives, and what to await from it. Today's lens that we are going to be looking at AI through is that of investing. To do this, I am joined by my wonderful guest, Leesa Soulodre. She is the founding general partner of R3i Group and the managing partner of R3i Capital. She has worked with many companies across many industries, from healthcare to smart cities. She has grown companies from the pre-seed stages to over 14 billion. She has helped companies find funding for over 200 million. And she's very loud voice about sustainability and AI and the future of both. So, Leesa, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you do? What's the day-to-day of someone like you, like a serial entrepreneur, looks like?
Yeah, we are actively supporting founders to connect to capital, to connect to customers, and to connect to non-dilutive pathways. And R3i was set up to be a safe pathway for what are today dual use case assets. So anything that can be used for both commercial or military purposes is anything that has AI in it today. And founders who are in deep tech have three challenges. They have a commercial challenge or commercial valley of death that they need to get over to make sure that the product that they're building does what it says on the tin and it has value. They have a technical challenge, which is that it needs to be hardened and capable of consistently performing in the same way every time so that it can be safe for the person to use it. And of course, it has an ethical challenge because everything that we use today almost always doesn't have a kill switch. And therefore, inherently, it needs to be safe in its provision.
Well, those are quite the challenges, I would say. I think I read somewhere that fairly recently OpenAI has disbanded the group that was specifically doing a lot of the work on the kill switch and the control of the ethics of AI. So I don't know if you've read it, but what are your feelings on how is the whole industry now facing those challenges?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because if you remember with the proliferation of Airbnb and making everybody's homes available to everybody, we needed to put in these trust and safety teams. And then we had the proliferation of taxis and everybody's car was able to be used as a taxi. And so we needed these trust and safety teams. And now, of course, we have AI where, for example, our old deep neural network compression technology could actually be used to kill more people faster with less energy. And if you consider that any AI could have such a purpose, clearly we need to maintain this notion of a trust and safety team to make sure that our technologies will not be misused for unintended purposes. And so any organization with as much influence as OpenAI has, not investing in a trust and safety team is going to face significantly legal and regulatory hurdles, but they're even going to face more social license to grow and innovate hurdles as they move forward because they won't have the implicit trust from their user base.
And in your opinion, what can be done both from the social standpoint and maybe from a regulatory standpoint to find a balance? Because so far, when you're looking at the history of tech companies, they're not the ones that follow regulations all too eagerly, and regulations don't tend to catch up fast enough with what the tech companies are doing. Do you have any idea of how that can be addressed?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I sit on the board of the AI Asia Pacific Institute, and we're building with governments across APEC, for example, safety rails or considerations for safety rails as we roll out AI. And one of the challenges is take Singapore as a nation, take generative AI. Today on PitchBook, I have 66 generative AI companies registered. They're in their nascent stage, right? These are seed to pre-Series A, if you're lucky, companies, asking kids in a sandpit to spend money on regulatory oversight when they haven't even yet confirmed that their product does what it says on the tin and it delivers value consistently on scale for a customer is madness. These guys don't have the money to do that. And the product is not yet hardened enough for them to abide by any rules, because we're breaking fast and fixing things as we pivot 27 times to get to the other side. Inherently, we need to build these guardrails into the very fabric of the technologies that underpin our technology. So, for example, if I have a generative AI company built on the back of OpenAI and Microsoft, it makes a lot more sense to in-build the regulatory fabric to those cloud companies that we're dependent on. So therefore, it is regulated by application, as opposed to asking the small startup companies building on the back of to try to invest money to comply. It just doesn't make any sense. Take Hugging Face. We boiled the ocean of Hugging Face. 2,000 companies that said they used Hugging Face. When you got down to the raw roots of it, 200 companies were actually truly using Hugging Face, and only 16 of them were fundable, in our opinion. And so these are companies in the very early stages of development. And so if you want to build an ecosystem, and you want that ecosystem to thrive, and you want it to get there faster, safely, with trust, you're going to have to build that into the fabric itself. And so asking a Microsoft to comply or an Amazon makes a lot more sense than asking a startup.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And can you explain what Hugging Face is for those of the viewers that are not aware? And for me?
Sure, it's an open source large language model.
Yeah. Okay. Open source large language model, as opposed to like ChatGPT, which is also probably the most famous large language model out there on the market right now. Okay.
Yeah, correct. And it's not an open source large language model. It's a commercial intent, locked down so that people can prosper and make money.
Yeah, that's the inherent kind of the core of the discussion, I think, are surrounding OpenAI, and a lot of the people that are currently used to work for OpenAI and are leaving the company. I think those are the same kind of arguments that are being thrown around of whether or not it should be as commercialized as it is, and whether or not right is the time, and whether or not the focus of the company has shifted too much towards commercialization rather than staying at its roots of promoting AI as a whole. And I'm guessing you're more of a... Yeah, please continue.
I was going to say, it always depends on whose money you take as to where your intentions lie. And when you're backed by one of the biggest Microsoft technology partners on the planet, then clearly you inherently have to meet the shareholders' objectives, which is to make money.
Yeah. And ChatGPT is like the fastest growing app in the history of apps. So
yeah.
What can you do? And I'm guessing you're more of a supporter of the open source model rather than the closed source model when it comes to LLMs, or do both of them have their...
I'm agnostic. I think different horses for different courses. I'm a technologist at the end of the day. We back technology first and then people, because we need to make sure that the technology actually does what it says on the tin. And fundamentally, we want the technology to work as efficiently and as safely as possible. And so ChatGPT is wonderful for converting high volume, always the same tasks. I use it all day, every day. Therein, obviously, other players in that ecosystem aspire to do the same thing. I, however, don't invest in that asset class. I invest in applied AI technologies around critical infrastructure. So I'm looking at the digital transformation from point A to point B in a value chain around highly regulated industries that power our urban smart cities. So think about energy, think about healthcare, industrial manufacturing, water and agriculture, mobility, and space, safety, and security and surveillance. So I'm really living on the very digital fabric of a smart city. And by default, I'm working into the verticals of a smart city. OpenAI is ubiquitous. It's a high volume, always the same automation. I'm in highly regulated sectors in my asset class, and I would not put OpenAI necessarily into those same domains.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So then where does the line end? So when does a project, in your opinion at least, become more applicable, more real, more tangible? What are the projects that you would invest in rather than the projects you are not? Naturally, some regulatory compliance is a factor, of course, but I'm guessing the space is still new and regulation tends to kind of lag behind, like I said. So for you personally, where's the line?
Except we're really selling into very old traditional industries, right? Energy. We might be investing in renewable energy these days, but energy is a highly regulated sector. And if you want to innovate in that sector, you better get into a sandpit approved by the regulator of that sector. Healthcare, you can put in the same bucket, right? You need that sandpit by which to innovate because you're in a highly regulated ecosystem. I'm a deep tech investor. That means that I only invest if there is true scientific research and technological invention behind it, represented by one of two things, either a patent pool or a data moat, one of those two things, and a data moat that you own, not Microsoft and OpenAI.
Can you explain what those two things are? So a patent pool and a data moat, I'm sure not many people are aware what that even is.
Yeah, so if you're a research scientist in a science and technology university, you need to protect what you've invented. And so almost always you will apply for what they call a patent. And a patent protects the idea or the innovation that you have invented. So if anybody else wants to use it, they have to license it from you or pay you. The challenge is when you publish it, now everybody knows what it is and it's no longer secret, right? And that's the challenge with having a patent. And so particularly in software, there are often very few protections outside of just copyright. And so it's a race to the other side. But now in an AI or data economy, it's a race to the other side. And while you're at it, the delivery, the identification and classification of data that you are collecting and you are processing on the way through. So the key question is, if data is the new oil, the new asset to be monetized, what data is your company collecting, identifying, classifying, that somebody else could use to create new products or perhaps could use it to power their existing product? And I'll just use a very simple example. In 2009, I joined a company called RepRisk. They monitor negative news information. But what they did beautifully is that they not only collected and classified and tagged that information consistently in many, many languages all over the world. Any financial data provider today can take their raw data set and backtest it to identify alpha models to create funds or perhaps new financial instruments that we can then use to make money on the public stock market. So as an example, maybe I create a exchange traded fund using only negative information in order to filter the companies that come into that exchange traded fund. And I know if I focus on positive reputation companies, that is those companies that have a low environmental, social, or governance risk index, I'm going to get outperformance against the Standard & Poor's index. And therein lies the beauty of that data moat of rep risk. I've now used all the basic information that they've collected, identified, and classified with tags against country, sector, sensitive topics, and company, and I'm able to create new financial data products. These guys have a massive data moat.
Okay. That's a very interesting thing. Like the whole environment is in of itself, once you're a part of it, becomes a proof of credibility and a self-supporting infrastructure, if I basically understand it correctly. So if you're able to publish a patent, and the more patents you're able to publish, then the whole process of publishing a patent already forces you to be compliant to specific regulations and to specific processes, and puts you in an expectation of the other end.
It also means if the company fails, I have something to sell. So it's always management from outside.
At least some assets in the form of patents, I guess.
Yes.
But as far as I'm aware, and I'm definitely not an expert on that part, but as far as I'm aware, there's a lot of companies that put this as a process, basically publishing as many patents as they can without necessarily developing the technology behind them, because maybe somebody else will come in and then will just sell the patent and then make money that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see maybe an impact of AI on that area? Will it become maybe better or worse? Will it become easier for the average company to form a patent with the help of AI? Or maybe the other way around, for it's much easier for the bigger guys to just patent everything and then you no longer have access to that instrument?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, generative AI is fantastic for ideation, right? Especially for brainstorming. I just sat with my helper identifying 50 new names for her new rice company. It's a fantastic tool for ideation. And so why not, right? Absolutely. I think it can play a massive role in ideation. But just like in hedge funds, I can use it for story ideation. We can use it in many areas of our lives where we have to do a high volume, always the same task. And when you apply that to your own life, looking for high volume, always the same tasks, there's so many use case applications that we can apply it to. But we have to be careful, coming back to the point of trust and safety. These AI models are hallucinogenic. A lot of that data is not true. Ask it to write a bio on me prior to this meeting. I can guarantee probably 50% of the information that came through is irrelevant to me as a profile. And so we still have to focus on the fact that while it can deliver a high volume, always the same output, ultimately the human still needs to check that this is in fact true and valid.
True. So then at the end of the day, who has the advantage? Or, everybody has a tool, and then the balance of power is not interrupted in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we still need human creativity, human empathy, and human ingenuity in order to get to the other side. The human has trained the model. It's our input in, it's our input out. Garbage in, garbage out. It's our job to make sure that what goes in is not garbage.
That's quite a task. I feel like that's not an easy one to accomplish. Sounds easy enough, right? Just use common sense. But as we know, common sense is not that common. And it has many different interpretations of what that common sense can even be. Okay, so can you maybe share a little bit of experience over your professional lifetime? I'm sure you faced different technologies that are promising to change the world, right? Since being in deep tech, that's basically your environment all the time. And AI is just one of those technologies. And for people inside the tech bubble, it seems different, it feels different, maybe to some people at least. To people outside of the tech bubble, it may seem maybe revolutionary, or it may seem like just another fad that technologists like to talk about. But how does it influence my day-to-day? Does it help me or my family survive better. So what's your experience? Does it differ from technologies that were promising to change the world beforehand? Is it similar to the ones that failed, or is it similar to the ones that succeeded? What do you think?
I love this professor in Stanford. His name is Professor Eugene Stein. He's an old friend of mine. And he teaches a class on innovation timing. And he talks about the Cinderella effect and basically saying that timing is everything. You don't want to be too early to the ball because nobody will turn up. And you don't want to be too late because the party has already begun and ended and you've missed the joys. And so I would say, in my experience, looking back on my career across 3 economic cycles, because I was born into the dot-com boom bust, innovation timing matters. And so what matters is how ready is the market to receive your technology? And what is the barriers to adoption? Is this a technology that I can trust? Is it a technology, for example, if it is a healthcare technology, maybe it needs a human element. So the psychosocial aspect of that technology is important. We look through so many different lenses to understand if now is the right moment for a technology. But I would have to say that I've invested in 3 technologies that are absolutely revolutionary when it comes to activation and implementation. Quantum Brilliance is room temperature powered quantum computing. It can deliver 100x less energy than traditional cryogenic quantum computing. It promises to put the power of quantum, even if it's working at only 2 qubits right now, into the palm of your hands. Now you don't have to be a quantum engineer to use quantum hardware. That is so exciting. It has the opportunity to revolutionize every facet of a smart city, from our security to drug discovery to material science to the data center operations and efficiencies and compute. I get really excited about technologies like these that are more than 10x differentiating, not just another mousetrap. Or take ViewMind, the brain health company that can look into your eye and capture millions and millions of eye movements in a single view over 10 minutes and determine with a very high degree of accuracy what level of degeneration you have or are likely to have. This changes the ways in which we manage diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, or multiple sclerosis, or Parkinson's, or even post-traumatic stress for a soldier. Now I can tell exactly where in the brain you are affected, and I can deliver personalized treatment exactly to that area of the brain. All of these types of technologies absolutely can change our lives and change our lives for the better. They can move us from what we call treatment to prevention to prediction. In the case of healthcare, that's value-based healthcare, focusing on keeping patients healthy, not sick. In the case of data centers, that keeps us at massive carbon emission reduction. It starts to change the way we think about the use of energy and water in the provision of our data centers. These technologies are not just a better mousetrap. That it does something slightly better than it's done today, or from a different market than it's done today. It actually truly is 10x differentiating. Think about 1,000 songs in your pocket from an iPod as it contrasted to your old Walkman.
Yeah, that was also a very, I lived through it. I'm old enough to have lived through it specifically. I had a Walkman, and then I had, well, not an iPod, but I had, the Sony equivalent of a digital one, I think. I never trusted Apple products for some reason. I never became an Apple, user. But still, I digress. So I remember that switch of like, oh wow, you can actually have those digital songs with you all the time, and you don't need CDs anymore, neither biting them or burning them if you're a pirate. But
Yes.
That's a whole other ethical discussion, I guess. I would,
You bring up a
yes.
really good point, though, just to interrupt quickly.
Yeah.
This notion of piracy. When I talk to government leaders aren't, I mean, everybody's concerned about war right now, but actually they're more concerned about piracy than they are about somebody invading their country, because
Oh, yeah.
piracy steals jobs, it steals economic growth, it steals economic prosperity, that flow on supply chain and consumption effect. Piracy is in fact one of the biggest threat to the development of economies today.
Oh, really? Are we talking physical piracy or are we talking digital piracy? Or both?
It could be either, right? It could be either. It could be the dodgy videos sold at the local market, or, third shift handbag, all the way through to digital piracy, where people are knocking off digital versions of books and distributing them en masse at no cost, stealing wages from the hands of people who invented them.
That's true. That's true. That's one of the limiting factors. But what about, like, I don't want to go into a whole debate about piracy, but I heard some positives about it as well. Like, it's one of the only available means of digital preservation of some media that that no longer generates profit but could still be valuable in terms of history or art or culture or whatever, and it gives more options to those that are limited in the infrastructure. So for example, digital distribution is global and digital, but a lot of countries don't have access to it, while piracy provides that means to them. So when I was growing up in Israel, for example, we didn't have an official Apple store when the iPod came out, and I had to buy something else because I didn't have any means other than that. And in other countries, like less developed countries, there's still a lot of lack of a digital infrastructure, and piracy is the only way they can get access to media, to content, to things being produced, and then maybe they can economically contribute through something else by.
It's a good argument.
Yes, again,
but I
not
think
trying to debate,
many governments would not share those views because they can't tax it, right? And they can't tax it, they can't contribute to the infrastructure, the healthcare, the education of their economies. So it's a double-edged sword, and I think there's never a perfect answer in this day and age for anything.
Of course, but it's interesting that it has two sides and different societies, I guess. Again, it's about being on a particular level, like you've talked with the projects and the regulations, right? When you're in a particular field and you're regulated enough by the field itself, your project becomes that much more tangible and trustworthy. The same, I guess, goes for the governments. The governments that can put piracy as a priority are already in and of themselves, I guess, are ready for a higher level of participation in the global society, I would say. So
and in many countries or emerging markets around the world, governments are not strong, right? They're opaque, and corporations are the ones that run those countries, really. And so we have to look at who are the stewards of governance in a country. Is it a government? Is it a company? Sometimes it's individuals who have a halo effect over their companies, but ultimately people look to the individuals in order to garner that notion of trust. So I think we cannot ever look at anything with a vanilla lens and apply it as a one-size-fits-all. It always has to be nuanced to the markets that we're going into.
Yeah, true. And in your work in venture capital, I guess you have to make that judgment call a lot. Just how do you do it? Like, you look at a project, you look at the people, and you have to predict the future. You have to choose where to trust, where to put your money, your investors' money, your capital funds' money. So how is it a superpower that you can just, are born with, or is it a skill that you develop over time?
Well, actually, we have very, very robust methodologies in order to de-risk each of these questions. And so let's just take a very simple factor of the team as a great example, right? Now, when we think about the team, we want to think about how mature is that team. And so we're going to go in to various elements around that team in order to make that decision. Now, many investors around the world have unconscious biases, and they will use their own personal gut feeling in order to determine whether or not that team is backable, because they've backed many teams in the past. They have experiences, either negative or positive, and believe that that serves them well in order to make a decision. We completely disagree and reject that notion. We believe that everybody comes to the table with unconscious biases. And so we've built an AI engine with our partners at Hatcher so that everybody comes through exactly the same filter right up front, which means that I can prioritize women and minorities who almost never get looked at for capital at the front of that funnel. And then black cat, white cat, I don't care as long as it catches a mouse. And so the question is how fundable is this company? What is the likely impact, tangible ESG product impact of this company? Is it additive, or is it simply a better mousetrap? We can have a look at the valuation. I always think I'm in the business of building great companies and changing societies. But actually, my professor, Aswath Damodaran, will tell me, no, you're in the business of getting in and out at the right price. And so that matters. What is the right price for this company? How do I get to that right price? A dialogue that is often under great duress when investors are negotiating with founders, because at the end of the day, it's our ownership that matters. And it's one of the reasons why R3i exists, because we were tired of seeing the vultures come in and butcher these companies. And so after that one terrible raise, this founder would never, ever raise again, because after that one vulture move, nobody else is coming, right? So we need to make sure that these founders have access to fair capital. If you come through our front-end engine, I have 100% transparency. You see what I see. My investors see what I see. We have 100% transparency. I think said no VC ever. But we believe that transparency builds trust. Yeah, so for us, we run everything through exactly the same maturity assessments. Yeah. And that allows a founder to evaluate us, and it allows us to evaluate a founder. It's not one way, right? It's a decision we make together.
That's a very nice system. It sounds like a little bit too good to be true, like complete transparency and evaluation that works and that helps you focus on women and minorities and bring, give a voice to the voiceless in the context of a fairly cutthroat environment, funding and overall the company mindset is a very capitalistic mindset, profit focused a lot of the time. And by nature, it is competitive. It is, it's limited in budgets and time and in resources and people and everything. So it's a bit of a cutthroat environment. And you bring, at least from what you're describing, you bring some humanity to that process, something that process is oftentimes lacking. Sorry,
yeah, I don't think the capital markets have to be brutal to be fair. Right? At the end of the day, we all want to get a good deal. We had a founder come to us and offer us a 50% discount just to have us at the table beside them. And I think when you add value to a founder, when you connect them to customers, when you connect them to other capital partners, when you connect them to non-dilutive R&D pathways, you're adding value. There's a win-win here. If you get a R&D grant of $5 million, that's $5 million I'm not diluted. That's a win-win. Right? I want you to win 5 million in non-dilutive capital. When you connect to that customer, I want you to grow your revenues faster. We're both here in the business of helping a founder do better. And a founder is in the business of upping their game, because what got you to here is never what's going to get you to there. And often you can't do it by yourself. We can't do it by ourselves. I'm never going to be an entire check at the table. I need my co-investors at the table with me to make that a success. So I think in early stage venture, it's quite a unique scenario. I think in growth as well, for that matter. But the reality is it takes a lot of money It takes a long time to get great inventions from point A to point B into the hands of the billions of people that need to use them. And at the beginning, we're the ones taking all the risk, it's true. But so too is that founder taking the risk with us. And this is a marriage. We're going to be at the table together for at least 5 years, maybe longer, and it has to work.
No. Well, it is a challenge, like in and of itself, right? It's not easy, and so far you've been succeeding in this challenge, and I hope you will continue to succeed. And with what you're describing, with how you approach the product selection process and what value you put in your investors and in the projects that you invest into, and how important the whole regulatory aspect of it and the ESG aspect as well, and the community and the people aspect, it paints a very interesting picture, I would say, a positive one that we don't usually see or hear from this side of the human experience, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the challenge in early stage venture is we need at least 50 companies in a portfolio to get a 15% likelihood of a 5x return without all the value add that we bring. Right? That just assumes that those companies are going to grow exponentially without us because we're making good bets. Yeah. But then, of course, we bring our technical assistance, we bring our non-dilutive capital pathways, we bring our billions or millions of dollars of free tech perks that help you reduce your burn rate. We bring our networks, most important. We bring our co-investor partners with us. And we bring our corporate and government partners that are going to help you get there faster. And frankly, I think all of the stuff outside of just the money is by far more valuable to any founder. And I think the other thing is, we have to deploy a lot of checks to get to that 50. And so we build our underwriting process on the back of accelerators, because that is the only way that I can do two things: add value to that founder, build trust, and at the same time do all my stress testing, right? The product market fit test, the team test, the commercial viability test. That is a win-win process that at the end you should have spent 12 weeks with us and either fallen in love with us or perhaps realized that you need to go back and fix the product, or you need to go back and make sure that your product is the right fit for that customer, or redefine your customer. Often people will come and live with us and they will say, I'm sorry, I'm not ready to raise capital now. I'll come back in 3 months, or I'll come back in 12 months. And that's great, because my job is to meet a founder where they are, not where we hope they will be, but where are they right now? And to sit in the mud with them, understand exactly what it's going to take to get them to the next level, and make sure when we build that 180-day win plan post-check, that together we can meet those milestones.
That's like, I completely agree with you on that point. That is very valuable for the founders themselves, like even the fact that you get a feedback that you can honestly say to yourself, yeah, I'm not at a stage where I need funding or I can get funding. Being a tech founder myself, like, I understand that you can be trapped in your own context, in your own bubble. And for somebody to honestly come in and give an evaluation of what you're doing, whether or not you're doing it in the right direction or using the right tools or the right technologies, is valuable, because then you can correct your strategy, your tactics, your product, your infrastructure, whatever else you have or whatever else you need. And that kind of honest feedback from your peers and from people more successful than you are is inherently valuable. And I also liked the mention of kind of the infrastructure of the networking and everything else that capital brings to the table. Again, I agree. I've been to the Antwerp Management School a couple of weeks ago for an alumni meeting, and there was this wonderful workshop by one of the professors wherein he was talking on like the future of sales and, well, business as a whole. And one of
Yeah.
the key things that he underlined was the current expectation in the business world is that you need to exist within infrastructures, basically. So, for example, my company is a software services provider. We're somewhere in the middle. We have contacts with products, maybe new ones, old ones, doesn't matter. And we have contacts with like enterprises, with larger ones, smaller ones. And as an infrastructure, when taken a look that way, we can easily connect products to enterprises that those products can benefit from, benefiting everybody in the value chain if we make a conscious effort of doing that. And that was basically the idea of the professor, that you exist in an environment, and that environment is not just the money that you bring to the table or the service that you provide here and now. It's more so, it's the relationships, it's understanding the limitations of everybody in that chain and trying to benefit everybody in that chain, because you all are connected and everybody coexists.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. And I think if you see yourself in isolation, you are already dead, right? You can't play in a data economy alone. We live on the digital fabric of a data economy, and there are only two ways in which you can win. One is you change the information asymmetry. You change who makes the decision, when it's made, where it's made, why it's made, and how it's made in the value chain. Or you remove that information risk, which basically gets rid of the middleman, right? And makes the process cheaper, more efficient, etc. And you realign incentives in the value chain by doing so. So if you want to win in a friction-free economy, you're winning together. You're not winning alone.
Couldn't agree more. Wonderful words that I agree with absolutely and thoroughly. So speaking about communities and interconnectedness, I am aware that you have been engaged, you've had some engagements with the Masters and Robots conference, which is, any conference is very much aimed at community building. Can you maybe share some experiences from that side of your life?
Yeah, about 8 years ago, I met a wonderful woman, Javita Mikhalska, and she had this idea for this incredible conference, which would basically become the South for Southwest of Central and Eastern Europe. And she had this vision that she would put them all in a stadium and we'd have like 20 stages all going at the same time. At the time, she was in Deloitte preparing this great conference, and there wasn't the alignment of incentive in the organization, and they just decided to can the project. But instead, she rebirthed it, Masters and Robots, and she's been running it now for 8 years. And I just play an active role as a godmother of Masters and Robots, helping to curate who comes, what the topics or thematics are, and what new invention or frontier thinking we're going to bring to the table each year. And I can't believe it's been 8 years already. It happened so fast. I also love that it's not just a domestic conference. It's a conference that is run digitally, globally, and brings and connects the world to Central and Eastern Europe and connects Central and Eastern Europe to the world. So it's this wonderful highway of innovation and ideas for 2 or 3 days every year. She's also included the kids, which is so important. At the end of the day, they're going to be the users of our new technologies. And very frequently, their voices are not included in our development or in our identification of the desired customer experience. But in fact, they're the people that are going to be using these technologies 10 years from now. And so she has digital kids or digi-kids that she's been running alongside this for the last 8 years. And so I believe that this is so very important in terms of bringing today into the now, right? We have to have both parties at the table.
That's also very, very nice thoughts of, giving a voice to kids in a more professional, I guess, environment, and then playing a role in the future of technological development and, societal development as well.
And we did one conference which was just focused on empathy and technology, and just the views that came from around the world on this topic, and the notion of how our humanity needed to be preserved as we were innovating or inventing, and how that would play out in the execution of these implementations around the world, because how it impacts you in your community is entirely different from how it may impact me and my community. And making sure that we've really understood not just that we're solving the right root cause of problem in that community, but also that we've truly understood the unintended consequences of this implementation. And I think asking the 7 so whats is something that the whole world needs to do so much more frequently.
Can you elaborate on what the 7 so whats are?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start with the 5 whys, which is how we get to root cause. And so, that 2-year-old that's driving you nuts asking, why daddy, why daddy, why daddy all the time. And actually, you only get to the true root cause when you hit the 4th and the 5th why. And that's why your child keeps asking why. And that's why you feel challenged, because actually maybe you're just answering the symptoms. You're actually not answering the root cause. But when we think about understanding the unintended consequences, we have to say, so what? So what if we do that here and with these people and in this community? What will change? How will that affect the community that lives there? And to keep asking, so what? Because it's only in the 6th and the 7th, so what, that we truly hit the unintended consequences. The problem is we stop at the 2nd or the 3rd, so what, and we never get to the 6th or the 7th. And therein lies the risks in our community and the potential impact on trust and safety as we move forward, because we're not asking ourselves those hard questions. Sometimes we don't want to know because it's going to cost us too much to fix it, or it's going to mean our technology gets to market slower than what we had intended, and slow means more money and less profit. And so that matters, right? But sometimes we're just not ready to do the work as a society, right? And therein, I think, is often the biggest challenge, because very frequently the issues that we face are not our issues alone. Think about the LIBOR scandal in the financial markets when Barclays Bank came up and said, we've got a problem. It wasn't Barclays' problem. It was a banking problem. When an individual company puts their hand up and says, I've got a problem, when it's an industry problem, they're always going to get nailed to the cross, right? Excuse my expression. When it's an industry problem or a societal problem or a plight of the commons, this is where we need systems thinking. This is where not you nor I can solve it alone. We have to get together and solve it collectively, and getting all the stakeholders around the table to solve it collectively, not just the industrial business people or the governments, but the communities, the academics, the not-for-profits, the think tanks, everyone in society that will be affected by that change or by that new technology. And I think sometimes we always pass it off as technology is moving just so fast, we don't have time for that. We need to make time for that. If we don't make time for that, the unintended consequences can be so detrimental that we might be taking 1 step forward and 10 steps back, when actually what we really needed to do was to take that 1 step forward together.
Again, a very nice vision for the future, but much, much more complicated in its execution in reality. But it is something that is worth investing your time and your resources and yourself in, I feel like.
Yeah, and to stop being apathetic, because I think we all get apathetic. I remember when I graduated from high school, I mean, everybody wanted to be in politics at that time because we all cared and we all wanted to make change. But somehow along the way, politics just got so toxic that all the smart people stopped wanting to come. Not to say that there's not smart people in politics today, but just to say that there's not as many as there could be, because somehow, somewhere, we lost the desire to make a contribution. And so what I'd love is for everyone to think deeply about what is the one problem in the community that they would like to solve right now, and how could they make a contribution? Do you know the biggest change makers as we move forward is the people in the community making these changes are going to be elderly people, or they're going to be children, or they're going to be mothers, people who we're not looking to to make those changes, but they will inherently solve those problems because it affects them, and it affects them directly. And so what's fascinating is we're going to have more change in the next 10 years than we have had in the last 100 years. Let me say that again out loud. We're going to have more change in the next 10 years than we have had in the last 100 years.
That's
So
quite a
being
statement.
apathetic is not going to serve anybody. Solving these problems in the hearts of our community, actually, you're not going to have a choice, right? Because climate adaptation, climate resilience, all of these things, geopolitical conflict, war, famine, these are now issues. I had a flood in my backyard as my colleague in Texas had a hurricane, as my colleagues in New Zealand had an earthquake. These are not 1 in 100 years events, right? No longer. They're events that happen every year. So only together can we accelerate impact. And that's actually the mantra of R3i. Only together can we rise. And we really deeply believe that.
That's a belief I can definitely share. I can see where you're coming from, and we will see how the next 10 years will play out and what will change and what things will stay the same. But looking back 10 years, things have progressed in some areas and regressed in others. And when looking at politics and the whole geopolitical landscape currently all over the world, and moving forwards towards sustainability and the future of us as a species, it's a pivotal time. It feels like it's a pivotal time where we should have more engagement, more control, more interest, less apathy, like you said.
Less apathy. It's true, right? And, I read a study this morning. I was reading with my kids at the dinner table, and it said that children who help a friend are happier than those who don't. I'm trying to encourage good practices. This kindness in humanity doesn't mean that we don't want to make money. Let me be really clear on that. At the end of the day, we are performance focused. Deep tech is inherently performance focused. An investor asked me recently, I don't really care, honestly, about the environment. Somebody else can care about that. I care about making money. That's my job. I need to deliver a return. But how does a healthcare product not improve patient lives and improve patient outcomes if it's a healthcare product? It's inherent in its very fabric as a deep tech invention. I would apply the same to energy. I would apply the same to cybersecurity, or the same to mobility. It has to get you from point A to point B, and hopefully safer, more efficiently, cheaper, right? If it's going to make you profit at the end of the day. And so one of the things that I want to challenge everyone to think about is becoming more sustainable doesn't mean less money. In fact, often it may mean more money, because we have a willingness to pay for the things that are going to change our lives for the better. So I just want everyone to think really deeply about the last thing that they invested their money in. And did it actually do what it said on the tin? Did it actually have an environmental, a social, or governance footprint? Now, it's funny about governance footprints, right? Because if the product is inherently if the product is inherently unsafe, that product will be taken off the market and you've just lost all your money. So we need to have good governance, because otherwise that product will not be allowed on the market. Think about environmental footprint. If that product is burning energy, using too much water, that's not sustainable. Ultimately, if we want to deliver that product to more and more and more people, we need to have an efficient utilization of inputs in order to get to our output. And so once again, if what we're driving for is margin and outperformance, we should inherently look for a product to be more environmentally sustainable. And finally, social. If fundamentally the use of this product harms human lives or has massive negative social consequences, that product will be taken out of the market and will lose its social license to grow and innovate. So you might get the product into the market up front, but no sooner is it in the market, it will be taken out of the market by the very users that you wanted to use it. And so I want to challenge every investor out there who thinks that they're not in the impact business. Everybody in deep tech is in the sustainability business. Everybody in deep tech is in the impact business. If that product doesn't do what it says on the tin, if it doesn't transform the way it is used in that economy from an environmental or social or governance footprint, inherently you're going to lose money and you shouldn't be investing. So everybody has this great notion that we're singing Kumbaya, right? And we're just here to give money away. That's not the business we're in. That's philanthropy. Yes, I actually have a foundation. I am a philanthropist. But as a venture capitalist, I'm here for the returns, and I'm here for persistent returns, and I'm here for the asymmetrical venture asset class returns that only venture capital can bring. That's the 100x, the 10x plus outperformers. Because if our product changes the information asymmetries, realigns incentives in the value chain, and gets rid of the middleman, guess what? We're all making money and we're all delivering sustainably.
I think that's what a lot of people forget. Like, the role of money in the society is not just to have money or to have something to spend. It represents the value that something brings into the society. And
Yes.
Sustainability and the future of us as a species, of our children, of minorities, of women, of everybody that's living on this planet, it has value. And as such is monetizable. It can bring prosperity, not just, not philosophically or just tangibly, but also monetarily. And I completely agree with you that that's a very interesting, nice position to have as a venture capitalist, I guess. Not being one myself, I can definitely empathize, at least, with wanting to promote that. And concerning the fact that, over the next 10 years, you are still going to be involved in venture capital, and the projects that you're investing in right now will be changing the world in the next 10 years. How do you see venture capital play a role in the future? Will it change? Will it remain the same? Will something else maybe happen?
So one of the things that people forget is that venture capital is one of the instruments in a portfolio that is led by an allocator. And there's a reason why venture capital exists, especially deep tech venture capital. We are a long only asset class, which means that we have a lot more resilience, a lot more reliability, because this isn't a product that needs to perform immediately right now. This is a product that is going to perform over the next 10 years. And it's true, we have a 5-year investment period and we have 5 years to exit it and get out. But I believe true deep tech investors will move over time closer to gigafund investors, which is that we are more in an evergreen asset class with the ability to get in and out over time by selling in or out to another investor coming into the portfolio. I think putting a finite 10-year term around some of these innovations or inventions limits the power and the profitability of these investments, right? I want to stay in some of these. In a true sense, if I had made more money from my early exits, I would simply become an endowment and continue to evergreen these wonderful inventions year after year after year to deliver intergenerational returns. I think in a perfect world, venture capital is made for family offices. It's made for pension funds who are there to deliver long-term returns. It's made for endowments and foundations who are not just here for today's return, but are here for the intergenerational returns. And I want everybody to fall back in love with venture. I think people fell out of love with venture as the overpricing and the spray and praying of unsophisticated investors flooded the market. I think there are a lot of people that look like us who are deep experts in our field, who are not just spraying and praying money, but are making calculated investments, or one might argue bets, on what will be the winning technology in that asset class, solving that problem tomorrow. But I also see something else happening. People out there in communities solving problems will become emerging managers in their own right. If they cannot get funds from governments or from corporations to solve those problems, they will look to solve them themselves. And all a fund is at the end of the day is a pool of blind capital. And so if you've got a problem in your community, you too can become a venture capitalist. Jumping on Carter or Vauban, you can set up your fund in only a few minutes, and you can rally the financial support from those people who also care about solving that problem, and you can solve that problem together. And that is a massive, massive future that every venture capitalist in the industry today need to embrace, because increasingly, as we need to get money to those areas that matter most in our communities, people need equitable access to capital. There has been $27 billion released in the nexus of gender and climate. And we need to make sure that all of that money gets to those communities and to those members that need it most.
Couldn't agree more. Like that's our whole episode today, is just me agreeing with your philosophical stand, I guess.
But it's not philosophical.
True.
There are thousands of emerging managers that look like me. I never set out in my career to become a venture capitalist. I set out in my career to become a doctor for Medicine Sans Frontier. Life never quite works out how you intend it. But I'm still on purpose. I'm still in the business of healthcare. I'm still transforming people's lives, and I still have the opportunity to do that in markets all over the world where we know that's going to have a massive impact. You can do the same, and there is nothing to stop you from doing that, except your will, right? How much do you want to get out there and make a change on the things that matter most to you? And how can I encourage you to not be apathetic?
That's the important part. That's the important part of not being apathetic. But in terms of what can stop somebody, I'm sure that there are many arguments can be made around, more pressing matters in your life being very limiting, from the very basic needs of healthcare or house care, or, just taking care of yourself or your relatives or your children or whatever else, not having enough, time to be empathetic, not having enough energy or resources to do it. But I would agree that you can at least make some strides towards that goal, that you can change how you think about it and try and make that change. And the more you try, the more you will succeed. And, as a founding serial businesswoman yourself, I'm sure that disproportionately the limiting factors of reality are, women face them most of the time. Women are the ones that are disproportionately at home with the children. Women are subject to sexism. Women have only gained rights in some countries very, very recently. In some countries, they still don't have them. As an experienced serial entrepreneur and a woman, what would you recommend to those that are still trying to start and looking up to do something?
Yeah, well, I think Gandhi said it the best. We have to be the change we want to see, right? I think it starts with us and it ends with us. I can tell you, building my own venture capital firm has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, honestly. And what was hard? I think the reality of women getting 0.5% of the allocation is hard. Doesn't matter if I have high double-digit outperformance, if I have a world-class team, I often get put in that gender bucket. I don't want to be in that gender bucket. I want to be in the outperforming asset class bucket, right? The one that everybody wants to have a seat on. So I think getting equitable access is important to everybody. But I do have to say that, I started this firm with a fellow colleague, a woman I met on a plane, right? Never say never. And we just started spinning stuff out of her lab. And then we started getting exits on the things that we spun out of the lab. And then we started rallying checks around the kids in our classroom that we wanted to help. And then we realized that every time we said, ethically, I can't help you because I'm your professor, go and speak to those 10 people, that if we just put walls around those 10 people, actually we could attract corporations and governments and other academic institutions to help those kids get there faster. And that's how R3i was born, right? Literally one brick at a time. I want R3i to be behind a mobilization of at least $1 billion in my lifetime. I've got 5 funds left in me: 50 million, 250 million, 350 million, 550 million, and that 5 million warehouse I just built with my 10 venture partners who are going to be the next emerging managers of this asset class, right? We have to invest in the future of the people within our community as well, because it's not just about what we can do. What if we were to teach them to fish and they could exemplify and replicate what it is we've just done? I'm not just accelerating 300 founders, I'm accelerating 3,000 founders. And then what if they do that in their communities? So I have this notion of replicability where if we just teach people how to fish, actually that ripple in the pond will go so much further than you or I ever imagined. And that's R3i now is 5 years old since our inception. We have 3 funds under management. We have a foundation in its early launch phase, which is ready to literally put $3,250,000 checks into the hands of the people that need it most, that are really inventing the scientific breakthroughs that are going to change our planet for the better. And we have to mobilize that capital. So if I can do it, that little girl that wanted to be a doctor for Medicine Sans Frontières, who had no idea what venture capital even was, anybody can cook. I genuinely believe that.
Very inspiring. Very inspiring to hear those words. It can sound very daunting. It can be very, very complicated from an outsider's perspective looking in. But seeing successes, seeing other people succeed, and hearing you talk about it, I believe can motivate somebody to take that step and just try and be a little bit less apathetic and more empathetic in their day-to-day approach.
Yeah, and there are people all over the world that are doing what we're doing. We're not in isolation. Coolwater Capital are backing the next generation of managers every semester. We've got Plexo Capital doing the same. We've got 500 startups doing the same. There are people like us that exist all over the world that are doing it in their communities. So I just encourage everyone listening to this podcast to think, who out there could they approach to help them make that next first step? The thing is, we don't have to know all the answers right now. We just need to know how to get to that next first step. And we need to find the right person that can lead us to the next first step. I'll be the first to tell you, as a serial entrepreneur, we cannot do this alone. We never could. No matter how educated, how intelligent, how prosperous we thought we had become in our lives, you can never do this by yourself. We can only do it with one another. And so look around. Find that person in your LinkedIn network that you think could be that person and ask them for 30 minutes. Everyone has 30 minutes to give to another human. And we should all just make the time.
I agree. As an entrepreneur myself, I am definitely absolutely nothing without my team, without my peers, without my partners, without my employees, without everybody that helps me do what I do. And like talking about business as a whole, like it's still about connections. It's about people talking to people and helping each other, just in the contexts of, of entrepreneurship, of business, of growth or optimizations or whatever. So yeah, Leesa, thank you very much for joining us here today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. It was truly inspiring to hear you talk, and thank you all for joining, hearing us talk about venture capital and AI and sustainability. So try and be a little bit less apathetic if you can, and a little bit more empathetic when you can. And comment, like, and share this podcast if you've liked it. Try and be more empathetic if you didn't. And if you want to hear us talk more, tell us what you would like us to talk about, because our job here is to try and bring you that competitive edge that can help you along your journey. Thank you for joining, and goodbye.